On my 14th birthday, my parents didn't buy me a present, or even make a birthday cake. Instead, my father locked our kitchen refrigerator with a padlock, looked straight at me, and said, "You're not a child anymore. If you want to eat, you'll have to buy your own food." From that moment forward, I worked 3 part-time jobs just to pay for basic groceries, clothes, and school supplies, while watching my parents spoil my younger brother with expensive gifts and everything he wanted. But apparently, even that wasn't enough for them. On the day I turned 18, my father pushed an eviction notice across the table and gave me an ultimatum: pay $800 a month in rent, or pack my things and leave. That night, I walked away with almost nothing and never looked back. 16 years later, a desperate knock came at the door of my architecture firm. Make sure you stay until the very end and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Luna Vance, and at 31 years old, I am the proud owner and principal of a successful commercial architecture firm in Seattle. But if you had met me 17 years ago, you never would have believed that I would make it through those years, much less build a successful career and eventually create an entire business empire. Everything started falling apart on a freezing Tuesday morning in October. It was my 14th birthday. I came downstairs expecting the familiar smell of pancakes, or at the very least, a simple happy birthday from my mother Karen. Instead, the kitchen was completely quiet, except for the sharp metallic click that echoed through the hallway. My father, Richard, stood in front of the refrigerator holding a steel hasp and a heavy brass padlock. He fastened the lock, slipped the key into his pocket, and then turned toward me. His expression was cold and completely emotionless. 14 is old enough to start pulling your own weight, Luna, he said flatly. He didn't even bother looking directly at me as he wiped his hands. Childhood is a privilege, not something you get forever. From now on, if you want groceries, clothes, or school supplies, you're responsible for buying them yourself. At first, I honestly thought he was joking. Then, the next morning, the pantry doors were secured with heavy chains too. That was when I realized he was completely serious. Meanwhile, my 12-year-old brother Julian was sitting at the dining table eating imported berries. Beside him were brand new designer sneakers and the latest gaming console my father had proudly bought for him. To my parents, Julian was the golden child who deserved everything. I was nothing more than an expense they wanted to get rid of as soon as possible. From that day forward, my life turned into a constant cycle of exhaustion and survival. While other teenagers spent their afternoons at the mall, met friends after school, or worried about high school dances, every minute of my day was planned around work. At 5 a.m., before the sun had even appeared, I got on my bicycle and delivered newspapers through the freezing rain. After spending the entire school day trying to stay awake and focused, I would hide in the back of the library during lunch and eat stale dollar store crackers with canned tuna. Then, instead of going home to relax, I rushed straight to my evening jobs. I spent 3 hours scrubbing greasy pans in the back of a local diner. After that, I worked another 2 hours tutoring underclassmen in algebra. Every penny I earned went into a hidden envelope underneath my mattress. I paid for my own winter coats from thrift stores. I bought my own notebook paper, my own feminine products, and even paid for my own doctor visits when I came down with the flu. My parents never once asked how I was doing. They simply watched me come through the front door after 9 p.m. every night, smelling like dish soap and cooking grease, and showed absolutely no concern about how exhausted I was. At the same time, Julian received a generous weekly allowance for doing practically nothing. When he turned 16, my father even bought him a brand new car. I lived through that treatment for 4 years. But I held on to one goal that kept me moving forward: graduate with top honors and earn a full college scholarship. Then came the morning of my 18th birthday. I walked into the kitchen with my high school diploma tucked inside my backpack. My father didn't wish me a happy birthday. Instead, he calmly pushed a typed piece of paper across the granite countertop. "You're a legal adult today," Richard said coldly. "Starting tomorrow, your bedroom will cost you $800 a month in rent. Utilities are not included. Pay on the first of the month, or move out." I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I simply looked down at the paper, then raised my eyes and stared directly at my father. I gave him one quiet nod. Within 40 minutes, everything I owned was packed into 2 heavy-duty black trash bags. My entire life fit into those bags. Thrifted work shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my textbooks, and the cash I had managed to save from scrubbing diner floors. My mother sat on the sofa with her arms folded, drinking tea without saying a single word to stop him. Julian didn't even bother looking away from his video game. I walked through the front door and stepped into the pitch-black rain. I never turned around. The next few years were incredibly difficult. For the first 2 months, I slept on an old pull-out couch in my friend Chloe's tiny basement apartment while working double shifts whenever I could. But I had already earned a full academic scholarship to study architecture, and I refused to let anything take that opportunity away from me. While my classmates went out and enjoyed their weekends, I spent mine inside university drafting studios. I survived on instant noodles, black coffee, and sheer determination. During the day, I worked as a paid intern. At night, I stayed up working on design blueprints until my eyes could barely stay open. Whenever my hands cramped from hours of drawing, or exhaustion made me wonder if I could keep going, I remembered that refrigerator with the padlock on it. That memory became my motivation. The night I left that house, I made myself a promise. I would never again let another person control whether I had enough to survive. I changed my phone number. I deleted my old social media accounts, and I completely cut contact with Richard, Karen, and Julian. As far as I was concerned, the family that had thrown me away no longer existed. I was going to build an entirely new life, starting from nothing. Over the next 16 years, that relentless determination slowly turned into something my family could never have imagined: undeniable success. By the time I was 28, I had co-founded Vance and Sterling Architecture and started landing major contracts throughout the Pacific Northwest. Within 3 years, our company had expanded into commercial urban redevelopment. We were taking on multi-million-dollar structural projects and earning recognition throughout the industry. I purchased my own modern home outright, built a strong investment portfolio, and reached complete financial independence. What I didn't know was that, while my life was moving forward, my parents' carefully maintained life was falling apart. I had been shaped by years of hardship, but their golden son, Julian, had been destroyed by years of being spoiled. Richard and Karen paid for everything he wanted. They even funded 2 prestigious college programs, both of which he dropped out of. After that, they continued supporting him financially as he jumped from one failed business idea to another. Julian opened an upscale lounge that collapsed within 6 months. Then he launched a luxury clothing company that eventually piled up more than $400,000 in debt to suppliers. Instead of making Julian take responsibility for his mistakes, my parents kept rescuing him. Richard took out a massive second mortgage against their suburban home. Karen emptied her retirement savings to cover Julian's growing legal bills, business losses, and expensive lifestyle. They convinced themselves that their spoiled son was simply a talented entrepreneur who needed one more chance. They couldn't see what was actually happening. Julian was draining everything they had. Then property values across the region began to fall. Richard's consulting work slowed down until the income eventually disappeared. They were suddenly buried under growing debt and rising interest rates. Still desperate to maintain their image in their wealthy neighborhood, they kept trying to make payments they could no longer afford. Eventually, they defaulted on multiple property loans. The house went into foreclosure. And Julian? He abandoned them and moved to Southern California. Richard and Karen were left facing complete financial disaster, and suddenly, the daughter they had once treated like trash looked like their only possible way out. The confrontation happened on a busy Thursday afternoon. I was walking through the glass double doors of my firm's downtown headquarters with my head engineer. We were discussing blueprints for a new commercial center when a familiar voice suddenly cut across the lobby. "Luna, Luna, look at you!" I stopped immediately. Standing beside the reception desk were Richard and Karen. 16 years had changed them. My father's hair had turned completely white, his shoulders were bent forward, and the faded suit hanging from his body looked far too loose. My mother wore an old-fashioned dress and held a cheap imitation designer purse so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. My receptionist looked extremely uncomfortable. Karen had practically pushed her way past security. She wore a carefully practiced smile and had tears already waiting in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," Karen said loudly, "we saw your firm featured in the regional business journal." She stepped toward me as if she wanted to hug me. I immediately took 2 deliberate steps backward. "We are so proud of you," she continued. "We always knew our little girl had something special inside her." I looked at both of them. "What are you doing here?" My voice was calm and controlled. There was no warmth in it. Richard cleared his throat. For a moment, he tried to bring back the same commanding attitude he had used when I was 14, but this time, I noticed his hands trembling slightly at his sides. "We need to talk somewhere private, Luna," he said quietly. His eyes kept moving around the expensive office. "Family has to stick together. Things have become complicated. The bank is threatening to take the family house, and Julian needs some seed money to get his life back on track." He paused. Then came the part I knew they had rehearsed. "As our daughter, it's your responsibility to help us. You should pay off the mortgage and buy your brother a decent home. After everything we gave you, you owe us at least that much." I didn't make a scene in front of my employees. Instead, I calmly motioned for them to follow me into the main boardroom. I pointed toward the leather chairs on the other side of the polished mahogany table. "Sit." My mother immediately began wiping her eyes. She was clearly preparing to deliver some emotional speech about forgiveness, family, and second chances. I raised one finger. She stopped talking. I opened my briefcase. Then I pulled out a thin manila folder and placed 2 documents on the table in front of them. The first was an old handwritten ledger. It contained every dollar I had spent on groceries, winter coats, school supplies, and other necessities between the ages of 14 and 18. The total came to nearly $32,000. The second document was the original eviction notice Richard had typed on my 18th birthday. The same notice that demanded I pay $800 every month for a tiny bedroom. I looked directly at my father. "You told me childhood was a privilege." My voice was steady. "You told me you owed me nothing." Neither of them spoke. "You forced a child to scrub grease off diner pans until midnight just so she could afford bread." I leaned forward slightly. "And now you walked into my company expecting me to give you charity?" Richard's face slowly turned deep red. "That was tough love, Luna," he argued. "It made you into the successful woman you are today." "No," I said. "I didn't raise my voice. My resilience made me successful. Your cruelty was simply another obstacle I had to survive." Then I reached into the folder again. This time, I pulled out a third document. It was a certified property deed transfer. Richard stared at it. Karen leaned forward. 2 weeks ago," I explained, "my development firm purchased a delinquent commercial debt portfolio from First Regional Bank." I placed the document directly in front of them. "That portfolio included the foreclosed mortgage on your suburban house." The room went completely silent. "I don't owe you anything, Richard." I paused. "But you owe my company $460,000. The color disappeared from both their faces. Karen gasped and grabbed her chest. Richard sat completely frozen in his chair. I opened the final document. "Here are my terms." I kept my voice calm. "I'm not putting you on the street today. I will lease the property back to you." I slid the agreement across the table. "The rent is exactly $800 a month." I looked at my father. "Pay on the first, or move out." They stared at the lease in complete disbelief. There were no convincing tears left. No emotional speeches. No excuses. No way to manipulate me. Richard finally picked up the pen. His fingers were shaking as he signed his name on the dotted line. Then he pushed the paperwork back across the table. A few moments later, they walked out of my boardroom with their heads lowered. The same people who had once controlled every part of a helpless 14-year-old girl's life no longer had any power over me. For the first time in 16 years, I felt a tremendous weight disappear from my shoulders. Justice didn't come from destroying them. It came from standing firmly in the truth of what they had done, and knowing they could never control me again. I didn't ruin my parents. Their own greed, bad decisions, and sense of entitlement had done that. As for Julian, he never received a single dime from me, and my parents finally learned what it meant to pay their own way. I turned my back on their past for good. Then I went back to my work, my company, and the peaceful life I had built with my own 2 hands. Now I want to hear from you. If you had been in my position, would you have offered your parents the lease, or would you have evicted them immediately and walked away for good? Tell me your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful real-life stories, and click on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now for another incredible journey. Thank you so much for watching.